Okay, so now let's go ahead and continue. We're going to get into some more lessons of spiritual psychology and discuss one of the primary programs running on the unconscious level of the mind, right? And that's the archetypal blueprint of fear. You can sit 1 second. Okay. All right. So, as I've stated in previous webinars, Akasha, or the Akashic plane, holds the blueprints of the material world or matter in the form of antimatter. It's very much similar to kind of like a negative film strip. That's a good way to be able to think of it, right? The film strip contains an inverse image of the actual picture that gets projected. The same thing takes place as part of the manifested world, except it is our spirit, which can also be called light. Remember, I mentioned that spirit exists in the pure light realms, right? Before it's been diffused. So you have spirit, which is light and consciousness, and that streams down through the Akashic plane, projecting the image in reverse into the world of manifestation. This is why there's so much discussion around the reality being a simulation or a hologram, because essentially it is. That is exactly what it is. We do live in a hologram, right? The non-dual light realms where your higher consciousness exists, that is technically true reality. And when I say true reality, I just mean that it doesn't mean this isn't real. A lot of people like to say like, oh, well, this isn't real, it doesn't matter, that sort of thing. That's not what I mean. I'm just trying to explain how the metaphysics behind the universe, right, actually is constructed, right? So non-dual light is where your true reality exists. This is where your true self exists. And our reality in universe is as a projected reality, with spirit acting as the light source, and the Akashic plane containing the blueprint or the film strip, which contains the entire story, movie, or drama of consciousness descending into matter and eventually ascending back into light, right? So that's why you hear, again, Akasha or ether or the void, right? And you hear things about like, this is the space where everything exists and nothing exists, right? You've heard sages talk about that, right? It's that great void. It is that potential of everything, right? When new things get birthed, when somebody creative comes up with a new idea, it's coming from here. They're tapping into and they're pulling something new out of here, right? Out of the potential of everything, because everything that could ever possibly exist exists within the Akasha, but it's just hasn't been streamed into existence yet, right? If you have 1 pound of matter that exists in the physical world, you have an equal and opposite 1 pound of antimatter that holds that object in place with the Akashic plane, right? So, like if I'm holding up this glass of water here right now, there is an inverse image that is actually underneath this right now that you can't visually see that's holding it in place within the Akasha. So Akasha exists everywhere, right? It's everywhere. We're just using this as a representation, but that's what holds this in place. This is what holds me in place. It holds you in place. This is how antimatter actually works, right? Similar to a film strip again. What's actually happening is a physical object is flickering with the light passing through the Akasha. It's flickering in and out of the physical, back and forth from Akasha and physical, right? Kind of like a film strip, or if you were watching a film right before, back in the day at the movie theater, and the light's passing through it, and it's same thing is happening actually in our material world. It's just happening so fast that you're experiencing it in a way that seems like it's completely solid, but that's actually what's taking place. And as you start to practice some of these SOLANCHA meditations, you'll begin to experience this, witnessing the flickering of objects in and out of Akasha yourself, right? So if I were to, again, enter a state of meditation and I'm looking at this glass, once I enter a certain state of awareness, I actually start to experience this cup. I can actually see it flickering a little bit. And I actually am able to consciously bring my attention and witness this flickering in and out of existence, right? So it's important to be able to understand the mechanics of how that works. And the more you understand some of these things and you get into the more advanced meditations, you start to understand how these metaphysical laws can be bent. And that is, or applied, let's say. And that's where you get into what real magic is and how to manifest and different things like that, because you understand the mechanics of these different things. And if you are able to develop your consciousness, your consciousness enough to be able to penetrate some of these things, then you can be able to work with these energies and actually impact the physical world, right? Magic is just simply the understanding of the metaphysical laws and being able to develop the awareness and skills necessary to be able to apply those laws to impact the physical world, right? That's really what's happening. Okay, so now I mentioned all of this because there's one primary blueprint that was encoded at the very beginning of creation within the Akashic plane. And that principle, that core, remember we talked about the unconscious mind, and it's like the OS and these things are encoded. So when during the beginning of creation, there is this initial coding that takes place, right? So imagine God is encoding this, your higher self, they're putting all these different things into the OS, they're programming the experience, right? And one of the primary things that was programmed at this level was the principal idea of fear, right? This is the first thing that was encoded. So the purpose of creation, you have to remember, is the evolution of your spirit. Spirit is participating in the material world because it wants to evolve. Remember I said that once you even reach the higher self, that's not the end of the game, right? So it is trying to evolve. And each and every one of us is participating in this. And because the purpose was to evolve through the experience of matter, Spirit kind of needed a way to be able to ensure that there was some base level program of a blueprint that said, that was like a desire, it was imprinting a desire in the experience to say, hey, stay alive, right? Because if there was no fear that existed, people would just go about doing different things and there wouldn't be any desire or instinct to try and stay alive long enough to actually have enough experiences so that you could potentially evolve. People would just be doing all kinds of different things with, not really caring and dying left and right. And it's not really the purpose of creation. The purpose is to be able to evolve, right? So this was created as the original primary concept in the archetype of fear, and fear of anything that could potentially harm us, to put our survival at risk, which then would impede our ability to be able to evolve and progress, right? This blueprint or program of fear is then stored within the collective and the personal unconscious aspect of mind, okay? So, like I mentioned before, it's a part of an operating system, and it's directly connected to the reptilian part of our brain in the form of that fight or flight, right? We talked a bit about this fear mechanism of survival and how it relates to the four elements of fire, air, water, and earth, right? Remember, we talked about that in part 3 of the Ascension series. I'm not going to cover that again, but if you haven't seen that and you want to learn more of the details about that, go back and watch the replay of part 3. We dive more deeply into that, but this is where that comes into play, right? Now, there's one other base level programming that's also here at this point, right? So we've got fear, and then there's another program that was imprinted in the very beginning of creation called love. And what I mean by love, it is really the concept of oneness or unity with God. There are many expressions of love, and when we talk about love, we're usually expressing it because we only know of it from the level of the physical. And so when we think about it from the physical, even from there, when we love somebody, what do you want to be able to do? You want to be with that person. You want to combine your life with that person. And then even there's the physical expression of love, where the act of making love, right? And having actual sex with somebody and joining the two bodies together. So the original concept, an idea behind it, is unity, right? So it is a program of oneness, or the seeking of oneness and unity back with God. And just like the core programming of fear, it is designed to, just like the core programming of fear is designed to help keep us alive, right? This core program of love is there to spark that desire and seeking of love, or the reunion with spirit, right? So you have these two different core pieces of programming, and there's much more that's there at the unconscious level, but this is those two primary ones and zeros that were operating at the very beginning that are impacting everything else. So one side of us is saying, stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. What do I need to be able to do to survive? Another one is seeking, like, oh, there's something in me. I don't really know exactly what it is, but I feel this desire for more. I'm seeking connection. I'm seeking love. I want to be understood. I want to be, I want to be liked. I want to, all these desires are really small aspects of the greater desire of seeking the union back with your higher self and with divine source or God. That is really what's happening. Okay. So here on the right, you will see another example of how the hologram actually works, right? At the top, you see that higher self, okay? And this higher self, like I mentioned, it streams down through providing that initial programming and blueprints into Akasha, right, into antimatter. Okay. And this process continues down into the mental and astral plane. All right. And that process continues and continues, entering additional programming at the collective and personal unconscious mind and subconscious mind. And from here, it projects eventually down into the conscious mind. And it does that way as an illusory kind of reflection of light experienced as matter, right? So again, you see that higher self streaming down, goes down into those archetypal blueprints, antimatter, down into the mental plane, the astral emotional plane. It hits the collective, personal and unconscious mind and subconscious mind. And our conscious mind experiences it as a reflection. So that's why you see in the image that it's really a mirror reflection of what's happening. So within SOLANCHA, we spend a lot of time understanding metaphysical laws of what's happening on the astral emotional level and the mental emotional level. The reason for that is because that's what we're actually experiencing. The physical level is actually just a reflection of the mental and physical level, right? It is just something that we're actually seeing that's taking place. It's finally manifesting it in the physical. So we experience it and reflecting it back, right? And on the left side, you see the images of the human eye, and it kind of resembles two galaxies or nebulas, right? I added this because it's very interesting, and it's a bit of a clue and insight here that you can reflect on and meditate on at a later time, right? But it has to do with the science behind what black holes are and what white holes truly are, right? And how it relates to exactly what I'm describing here, right? So think about that concept. You can research that a little bit later, black holes and white holes and what's actually happening. Think about your eyes and what you're experiencing, and what you're actually experiencing is just a image that your brain is actually creating as something for you to be able to see. It's not actual reality. The way you see reality isn't the same way an eagle sees reality. It's not the same way your pet dog or cat sees reality. This just happens to be the unique way that we're experiencing it. So reality, or one closer to reality, is just the energy and light that exists in the metaphysical space, right? And then it's being reflected through your eyes, and you're experiencing it through the conscious mind as matter being reflected back, right? So again, that's something you can do a little bit of research on your own and look into, because it's quite fascinating and interesting. Okay, so I've added this slide as well, and it's just another image, is another hint of symbology of the flower of life. If you're familiar with the flower of life symbology and how it relates to the creation of universes and things like that, this is another little hint here, right? So if you look here at this, you'll see that there's kind of looks like this other graphic I just showed you, right? And how that might relate to a multiverse, the creation of universes, right? And I'm not going to spend any time covering this right now, but I will spend some time going a little bit more deeper into the whole creation story and the cosmology of actually from life, from a spiritual metaphysical perspective, in the lessons that are in the upcoming SOLANCHA course. So if you're interested in that, we'll be covering that in much more detail, but it's a little bit of a hint for you moving forward. Okay, continuing on. So these two base levels of programming I mentioned before, fear and love, is part of what creates duality and polarized thinking, right? You see, on one hand, we're driven to connect and seek love, right? We're reaching out there. We want to do different things. We have all these desires of things, and we're imagining things and things we want to accomplish. That's part of that drive and seeking, right? We want that path back to evolve back to our true self. That's what we're doing. But then at the same time, we're constantly assessing a variety of perceived risks that we feel may threaten our survival. So it's like, yeah, I want to do this, but what if this happens, right? Oh, what about that? Oh, but what if that happens? Is that safe, right? So we're constantly dancing between these two primary different energies. So you can kind of think of this as it kind of creates a pattern, right, of expansion, reaching out towards love, only to be followed by contracting if we feel threatened at all during the act of expansion, right? And that can create all kinds of different problems. Okay, so as we incarnate and are born into our individual families, we start to feel our individualization around the age of 2, right? Give or take, some months. But it's at this point this is when we begin to feel those new limitations that have constrained us via physical matter, and we begin reaching out and exploring, expanding, testing, right? It's our instinctive search for love starts to begin, right? And then we start to formulate our beliefs. It's at that stage, around that age of 2, where we start to think, okay, again, this is all happening on an unconscious level, but what is and what is not love, right? That's what's running in the background, the program, okay? And these beliefs begin to create a false sense of identity, right? This is the identity we start to call ego. So we're doing this searching, we're out there, and we start to get programmed by all these different things. The ego and the personality, we start to take on actions and thoughts and behaviors. They're usually some type of mix of that expansion and contraction, right? It's based on all the different beliefs and things that were, maybe from past lives and then from this lives. And since our families are just made up of people who also have held a mix of expansive or contractive beliefs, these get passed on to their children quite easily, right? So throw into the mix a family where all the parents are missing, or perhaps the relationship dynamic between mother and father is destructive, the child will begin to take on all kinds of beliefs and accompanying thoughts, actions, and behaviors that are based on abandonment, right? Or destructive expressions of love, right? That they experience, with relationship. And as you can imagine, there's an infinite number of variations or gradations of these types of imbalances of beliefs. And in addition to the new beliefs and fears that are being passed on through your immediate family, this is also being stored in the collective unconscious, right? So you're also getting things to the point where you have fears from, on a global level, a national level, a racial level. It goes on and on and on. So you are being programmed on the unconscious level, and also contributing continuously to the unconscious level, right, for all these different things. So not only are you receiving that, every time you repeat it, you're actually contributing to it, right? So it's like a feedback loop. It's back and forth, back and forth. So when you start to heal and balance some of these characteristics, you are actually starting to contribute to the healing of your own family line, right? The global collective unconscious, the nation, right? Any racial karma and imbalances that there might be there through experiences over the years. So participating in your own healing is one of the best things that you can actually do, okay? Okay, and again, I want to repeat the fact that on some level, fear is actually positive and necessary, right? So remember, the purpose was and is still to keep you alive long enough so you continue to evolve. All of life has this level of programming, right? We're all trying to survive and we're all trying to expand and evolve at the same time. We're just doing it at different levels, but these same primary levels are still there. That's why you can see, whether it's in the plant kingdom or the animal kingdom, different biology that has evolved in a way to be able to try and protect itself, right? This is what's actually taken place. And remember that reptilian part of the brain, right? That invokes all those primal cravings to achieve wealth, right? Achieve power, the drive for relationship. It's all related for that security and survival, right? This again is what controls our fight or flight instinct, and it's in each and every one of us. We talked about it in part 3. About those 4 primary elements, right? It was earth is the foundation where, that primary need for security, money, and a safe environment, where water was the need for love and family and connection and that sort of thing, right? And then air was that element connected to our desire to understand things, whereas the fire element gives us that need to be able to control things or control others. But each and every one of those things, right, was related to some type of idea that's going to help us be able to survive. All those things we intuitively feel that, hey, if we do these things, I have more money, I have this, I have family, I have connection, that I have a better chance of survival, which means that I'll be able to evolve better. These are the programs that are running in the unconscious mind and that are expressed in that reptilian part of our brain. And it's only when our belief patterns are so imbalanced that we hand over too much power to the ego, which then, starts to almost entirely run our lives. And that's what leads to suffering, pain. So again, these things are needed. We just want it to be in balance. And this is why with SOLANCHA, it's built around creating this harmony and balance. That's the healing process. That's what we're looking to be able to accomplish, okay? All righty. So continuing on with that, pain is simply just a feeling of the loss of love, the neglect of love, unloved by self or others, right? That unworthiness to be loved. And if you look beneath every feeling of anger, what do you find? You find some deep-seated, root of pain. That's actually what's happening, right? We see, them then search outside themselves for approval, looking for others to love us unconditionally. This is usually what's happening. So the people who are usually the most angry, are the ones who are going through some of the most pain. And what they're really looking for is unconditional love, right? And this ultimately is what plays a big part in shaping our personality or ego.